Hello and welcome to Moneylife. It's been a roller coaster ride, which I think started a little bit with the market being depressed, and then the sudden surge when Nirmala Sitharaman, the finance minister, made a mini budget of sorts, surprised everybody, announced a bunch of rollbacks, promised to release money, offered a lot of goodies divided into silos, placated the auto industry, placated small manufacturers, and indicated that the government is finally willing to listen to people. But 2 days later, things were back to normal. I think the problem was on 27th August. The Government of India, for the first time ever, has asked the Reserve Bank of India to transfer 1.76 lakh crores of the central bank's reserves to the government kitty. And nobody quite understands what this means. There are lots of opinions, very polarized depending on where you come from. What is very clear is that one RBI governor headed the committee, which said the reserves can be given, and there are about 5 or 6 RBI governors ranged on the other side, former RBI governors, who say that this is a really bad move from the country's point of view. Now, the 1.76 lakh crore number is rather interesting because this is the exact number that a lot of economists say was hidden from the budget deficit. Hidden, fudged, whatever you may call it. This is also 1.70 lakh crore is also the sort of number which is a shortfall in taxes. Now, people want to know what is this money going to be used for? So when Nirmala Sitharaman was asked the question in Pune, she surprised people by saying, I cannot comment on what the funds transferred by the RBI will be used for. This is really worrying because the shortfall in taxes or the hidden fiscal deficit is not our only problem. There is a lot of outstanding dues and liabilities that are stacking up in a bunch of public sector undertakings which are humongous, and these include the Food Corporation of India, the National Highway Authority, power distribution companies, and these are not just debts that they have raised but all kinds of contingent liabilities. For this column, I'm going to talk about the NHAI, which is the National Highway Authority of India, which was charged during Atal Bihari Vajpayee's time as the Prime Minister to build the famous Golden Quadrilateral project. Unfortunately, since those heydays when it did a lot of fantastic work, it has been sort of downhill for the NHAI, which has slowly found its powers eroded and has increasingly become a typical government, rather corrupt organization. Now, this is one part of the issue. There's another part which is to do with infrastructure funding. Remember, infrastructure funding and infrastructure related ongoing work is important to keep the economy ticking because it provides jobs, it means government spending, it keeps people employed, and it is important for our economic growth that infrastructure should do well. So one of the things that the finance minister announced that day was that there's going to be another organization. No details, but she says there's plans for a new organization to provide credit enhancement for infrastructure and housing projects with an aim to enhance fund flow to such projects. Sounds good, except that this announcement comes almost a year to the date since IL&FS has collapsed. Infrastructure leasing and financial services has been the big non-banking finance company debacle where it had an outstanding debt of over 1 lakh crore. And as you know, a new committee headed by Uday Kotak and a bunch of bureaucrats, which is the new board of directors, has been struggling to find a solution. Strange as it may seem, this group had 347 companies. Every big project, including a lot of road projects and infrastructure projects, were in one separate special purpose vehicle. And the number of companies, step-down subsidiaries and SPVs of this group was not even known to the government, the regulators, or the rating agencies. It needed a newly appointed board which was going to find a way out of the crisis to discover how big this was. Now, if IL&FS has not been able to resolve one single case, and I really mean one single case because while the committee is working, not a single deal has gone through. Some companies have been shut down. Just yesterday, there were permissions for some wind power sales, but no money has actually come into the kitty 1 year since this new committee has been set up. So you have the finance minister talking about a new company, you have IL&FS with no solutions, which has been collapsing and doing all kinds of circular deals, as we now discover in the investigation process, for over a year from 2017 onwards. Why are we connecting this to NHAI? Well, here's the reason. NHAI has been running up a massive debt from 2014 onwards. 2014 being the point where a new government took charge. So, nothing to do with the previous government. NHAI had a debt of just 40,000 crores in 2014, and now it has soared to, again, that magic number 1.78 lakh crores. Okay, this is in 2019. All this has happened under the watch of Nitin Gadkari, who is the Minister for Highways and also Water Resources. The minister, unfortunately, has been behaving as though there is no issue at all. While several people have flagged the large liabilities of NHAI, things came to a head and led to a discussion last week when a newspaper reported that the Prime Minister's office has stepped in and has asked the NHAI not to build any more roads. In fact, it's put a full stop to what it's going to do. It has said you have to find other ways, no more raising liabilities. This led to CNBC TV 18 doing an interview with a former chairman of NHAI, and we were in for a bigger shock. The former chairman, Mr. Brijeshwar Mishra, said that NHAI's contingent liabilities are probably double its outstanding liabilities, which means over 3 lakh crore. Remember, 1.78, and he says double that. Over 3 lakh crore. What exactly are these contingent liabilities? These are problems that NHAI has had with a whole bunch of construction companies, builders, and contractors with whom it's doing business and building road projects all over the country. So every time it's a cost overrun or things are not complete or permissions are not in place, because NHAI is supposed to get all kinds of clearances, including environmental clearances, purchase of land, and then have these projects built. So when contractors are not paid, there is cases and this litigation, and this has been piling up tremendously until you have now a giant problem of huge debt as well as contingent liabilities. Why hasn't this been a factor of worry? Well, guess what? Because like everywhere else, you remember the IL&FS case where rating agencies looked at it as though it was a quasi-government company. NHAI is completely a government company. So it gets top ratings. Nobody comments on what it owes because Sarkar is here to pay from our money. And this is exactly what the rating agencies have done here. So what it says is the rating agency in this case is ICRA. And while ICRA has given high ratings, it also makes a point that support from the Government of India, both financially and operationally, would be crucial for maintaining the credit profile of NHAI. Where is the Government of India going to keep giving money from? Now, what about contingent liabilities? Has ICRA flagged them? Believe it or not, it says that these are sizable, and the number that it puts out is tiny. It's just 63,000 crore as compared to what we've just discovered. Now, people in the industry say that nothing secret about these liabilities because, as an industry veteran told me, each of the companies that's doing business with NHAI, all the big ones that matter and that have gone to court, are listed entities. And they have put in their annual reports what NHAI owes them. And these are literally thousands of disputes. You want to know what the numbers sound like? Okay, in 2014, these are old numbers because we don't have the exact number of litigation as yet. In 2014, a top audit firm apparently said that NHAI has 200 cases pending in the Supreme Court alone and has over 5,000 cases pending in various courts, district courts and high courts across the country. From 2014 to 19, when its liabilities and its work has grown so much, you can only imagine that the number of cases is probably twice as much. What is the cost of this litigation? and I don't mean just the economic cost, just the actual cost of paying legal fees is also going to be enormous. As a government entity, this is irresponsible and it is a cost that ultimately the people of India are paying. Now, there are many companies which have become so wary about dealing with NHAI, but there is no option because if you want to participate in large construction programs and road building and infrastructure building, then you have to deal with it. So some companies have figured out dubious ways to deal with them, and they manage to insert clauses in the contracts which allow them to change all kinds of details after the contract is signed. This just shows you what a mess the NHAI has become, and looking at it and cleaning it up is long overdue. Now, let's take a look at the run up to how and why we have reached this situation. I also want to make one more point before we come to why NHAI has had a problem. Remember, you need to resolve the IL&FS mess because it has an impact on the entire NBFC or non-banking finance company sector. IL&FS itself has claimed that NHAI owes 17,000 crore to it. Now, let's assume that the previous cabal which was working, which created the problem in IL&FS was exaggerating. The new management seems to believe that that's so. But even then, the figure that NHAI owes even IL&FS is huge. Now, you cannot resolve the IL&FS mess without NHAI playing an active role. And if it's going to keep fighting with this company over these disputes and it's going to be in court, that resolution is not going to happen. I am told that there is a committee that's been set up to take a look at how to resolve these legal tangles as well, because no resolution of IL&FS can really progress smoothly until its biggest subsidiary, which is ITNL, IL&FS Transport Network, is going to be resolved in all the road projects, which are IL&FS's biggest hassle, are here, and there are disputes with NHAI. So this impinges even on a current resolution. Now let's come to NHAI itself. I think here the buck really stops with the minister because Mr. Gadkari seems blissfully unaware about where on earth is the funding going to come from and how is it all going to be paid back. He's been announcing new projects and launching them like there's no tomorrow. So with funds having dried up, it's a worry. And NHAI is also participating in this big, ambitious Bharat Mala Pratiyojana project, which just phase 1 has an outlay of 5.35 lakh crore. Okay, NHAI was supposed to build 19,800 kilometers of this first phase. Now that the PMO has said stop everything, is that going to go forward? And where are the funds going to come from? I think it's a big question mark. Were the problems in NHAI unknown? I don't think so, because in 2015, soon after this government came to power, Mr. Nitin Gadkari set up a small committee to look at 3 things. This included how to create a separate authority for expressways called the Expressway Development Board, and how to raise funding in NHAI, and how to revamp NHAI to put an end to problems like litigation. And one of the things that was said by that committee is that you need to empower, strengthen, and make it a lot stronger. Nothing happened. Not a single decision of this committee was implemented. And instead, project after project was announced until we have a looming crisis. Now, why do I say the minister seems blissfully unaware? Because in 2017, speaking at a program, he said the government was planning to invest 8 lakh crore in 30 rural connectivity projects, of which 5 were set to begin in a few months' time, 2 or 3 months. He also said at that same meeting that I have no problem of money. And remember, public sector banks have been funding this. Obviously, by 2017, IL&FS was in serious trouble. So public sector banks weren't quite forthcoming even with NHAI. So he says that if banks don't give me money fast enough, then we will offer these projects on a engineering, procurement and construction mode, which means somebody else pays for it after the clearances are given and the project is handed back. I mean, this is really funny because who's going to fund them either? Okay, the minister wasn't too concerned about that either because he talked about raising money through an IPO, and he boasted that an initial public offering by NHAI could raise as much as 10 lakh crore, and he was going to talk to the finance ministry to make it happen. Fortunately, that hasn't happened. No money has been raised because if NHAI had made a public issue, you can bet that the subscriptions would only have come by arm twisting life insurance corporation or public sector banks and pension funds and a whole bunch of mutual funds. We don't want that happening. That's exactly how money went into IL&FS as well and has been stuck there. The minister kept announcing new projects. So he was going to spend another 80,000 crore for ever increasing traffic load. How was he going to do that? He says that there was going to be one additional lane built on every national highway every 3 years. Now, all this, the reason why it's costing so much is because of the cost of land acquisition. There was a law passed, albeit by the previous government, just before 2014, that has humongously raised the cost of land acquisition. The cost of land acquisition has gone up. You don't continue to announce mega projects without thinking of funding, but you need to find other ways. You need to move your goods and services and people in different ways. Instead, we have the aviation sector in a complete mess with 2 airlines having folded up. We don't use our waterways. India has a huge, vast coastline. We have big rivers. We only talk about waterways, which is also under the same minister, and it would cost much less, but there is no talk about using it. We are instead spending money like there's no tomorrow on massive road projects. Minister kept claiming there's nothing to worry about. And like I told you, the IPO did not happen, but LIC was asked to invest just now in July 2019 30,000 crores by subscribing to NHAI bonds. Meanwhile, Mr. Gadkari also told the Rajya Sabha that he planned to create a separate finance arm for the NHAI. I don't know whether this is the same thing that Nirmala Sitharaman announced last Friday. We need to see how it pans out. But you may have any number of arms until you clean up NHAI, until you cut down the cases, until you get things moving again. There's no point in creating financing arms until you clean up the mess that we are in today. Now, there are a lot of recommendations, like I said, including fundraising that was made in 2015, which had been ignored by the minister. Don't ask me why. In the meanwhile, we've had this big infrastructure problem with IL&FS. What is the solution to this mammoth financial muddle that has been created? Nobody knows. The only silver lining is that the Prime Minister's office seems to be aware of it. The Prime Minister's Principal Secretary, Mr. Nipendra Mishra, is supposed to have held 6 meetings to discuss the issue. And I just hope that the solution that he finds is not going to be one that levies further cess, taxes and tolls on us, the people, because I think we've taken as much as we can. We need different solutions. We need out-of-the-box solutions. The solutions are not going to come from financing arms. It's going to come from a judicial cleanup. It's going to come from cutting out court cases. It's going to come from planning our projects well enough so that you don't dump problems on private sector contractors and you're not forever fighting and going to court. The country needs it because we cannot do without infrastructure. Thank you so much.